Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. Really excited for this week's mock draft. A ton of work goes into these videos each and every week, rethinking possible scenarios, situations, which teams are going to value which players, prospects, and skill sets on draft night here in 2024. I'm extremely excited. I hope you are as well. So let's jump into that NBA mock draft now. If you guys do enjoy, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content as well. And I don't want to waste any more time. Let's get into it. Make sure you guys go give us a follow on Twitter as well. Links in the description for that. And here we are now, pick number 1. The Atlanta Hawks are on the clock. And I think Atlanta getting this first overall pick was super important for them. I talked about this a bit last week. But this is really an organization, a team that, in my opinion, needed the first overall pick. I think they were just at a spot where they were going to struggle a bit long-term with the way that their roster was probably built and some of the questions that they have ahead of themselves. But I do think as of right now, the player that most people are cementing as the number 1 overall pick, which I don't think is a concrete, solid, done discussion. I do think there's a two-man race right now for this first overall pick. But right now, who I am projecting first overall for the Atlanta Hawks is big man, forward/center, 7-footer Alex Sarr, playing in the NBL for the Perth Wildcats this past season. Had a pretty good NBA draft combine week. Obviously, the jump shot kind of fluctuated a bit. I don't think he really gained a ton of stock, but he also didn't hurt himself either. I think tested in very well, measured in at 6'11" and 3/4 without shoes on, which makes him a real 7'1" big man in the NBA. And I think if you go back to his film, some of the most important things about Alex Sarr's game is his defensive flexibility, versatility. He's got really great hip fluidity, someone who can change directions with guards. And that's one of the most impressive things about his tape is when you turn him on and watch the film, you watch full games, Perth was able to use him up at the level of the screen. They were able to use him as a weak side shot blocker. They were able to use him as a rim protector in drop coverage a bit. They could blitz with him. He's mobile enough to hedge and recover. Really, any defensive scheme you want to use with Alex Sarr is what you're going to be able to do as a coach. And for me, the way that I look at analysis and the way that I break down the game is how do these players find ways to get on the floor and what type of flexibility do they afford their head coach? And someone like Alex Sarr gives Quinn Snyder a ton of options. Quinn Snyder is one of the most creative coaches in the NBA. Now, he hasn't always had the most postseason success. He's had some flawed rosters and some flawed situations, of course. Atlanta's been a real struggle since he's gotten there. But I think with Alex Sarr, it gives him a defensive chess piece that he hasn't had since Rudy Gobert. And honestly, I think Quinn Snyder mismanaged Gobert in some ways, really relied on Gobert with the way that roster was constructed. But now in Atlanta, a team that already has some good size and athleticism in the front court, you think about Jalen Johnson and Onyeka Okongwu, Clint Capella. We'll see what happens with him if he gets traded or not. Obviously, DeAndre Hunter's there as well. Atlanta gets a cornerstone piece to their franchise that I think will give them a lot of defensive flexibility in the next to Trae Young, gives them that offensive short roller, that offensive pairing that I do think makes a good deal of sense as well. For the Hawks here, I think this is a really, really strong pick from the defensive side of the floor especially. I think Sarr can be kind of a combination of a few different defensive players in the league. I think we see a little bit of Evan Mobley in his game from his defensive versatility out on the perimeter, but I think also defensively as a shot blocker, he has a little bit of that Jaren Jackson Jr. to him in terms of a length, size, athleticism profile. Now, obviously, we need to see Sarr probably bulk up just a little bit, get a little bit wider shoulders, get in the weight room, and then also strengthen his base a little bit so he can be more of a post shutdown defender. That's not super important against most teams, but against the Sixers, against the Nuggets, you do need that lower base strength to defend Jokic and Embiid. So Sarr has some room to grow still defensively, of course, and offensively has a long ways to go with his touch and shot making that he's already shown a ton of flashes in. Also, I think his decision making as a short roll passer is something to monitor. But Atlanta's getting, in my opinion, right now the best player in the draft. First overall, I think it's a really good selection for them. Second overall here, we have the Washington Wizards. And Washington fans, I am super excited for you guys. I have been nothing but singing your praises since the hiring of Michael Winger and Will Dawkins. And I think that Winger-Dawkins brain trust is leading Washington down the exact right path. You think about dumping Bradley Beal's no trade clause and his terrible contract on the Phoenix Suns for value. I was one of the few people in the world that really understood the benefits for Washington in that trade. Obviously, Wizards fans, I'm sure you guys got it. But most of the analysis at the time was, wow, the Suns got a big three, and wow, the Wizards didn't really get much back. No, they got a lot back for that contract in that situation. Since then as well, they were able to trade Porzingis, who had a player option, so they got him to opt in to trade him. That was a huge win for the Wizards. They traded up to get Bilal Coulibaly, who I think projects to have a very nice career ahead of him, especially with his defensive versatility, length, and size. And I think that's what Washington's going to continue valuing in drafts. Now, last week I mocked Donovan Clingan to the Wizards, and I understood some of the pushback there. I do think that's still a strong pick if the Wizards go that way. But in this week's mock, I did switch it up, especially because this prospect just had the 2 best games of his young career right before this mock draft. And second overall, I have the Washington Wizards selecting forward Zaccharie Risacher, playing for J.L. Borg in the L&B Pro A League, the league that Victor Wembanyama was just in last season. So it's a real legitimate league, very useful for evaluating prospects. And Risacher has really caught a nice rhythm over the last week or so. Had a 28-point showing where he shot well over 50% from 3, shot I think 9 of 14 from the field. So Risacher had an incredible performance where his shot making was really on full display. He attacked closeouts, got to the rim off the bounce. Obviously, there's still a lot to be desired in terms of his actual overall shot creation profile. He's not going to be a Devin Booker-esque wing where he's going to create a ton of shots, step back, pull up jump shots, those kinds of things. But what he does have is a ton of functional off the catch skills. And what I mean by that is someone who, whether Jordan Poole has the ball or Bilal Coulibaly has the ball, whoever is holding the rock for Washington, when it's like a boom, boom, one more pass over to Risacher and you have to have him do something, that's where he's going to thrive. He's going to be a real beneficial fit off of other players. I had to think about what I wanted to say there for a second. And I think the reason that he's going to be so beneficial is because not only does he have the length and size as a shooting threat to really pose problems for other teams, because you can't put a point guard or a shooting guard on him most times, because at 6'10", he's going to tower over those guys, be able to shoot it over the top of them pretty much uncontested. And he's also going to be able to get to the basket uncontested with those smaller guys on him. So from a positional flexibility standpoint, a lot of teams, their best defenders are wings, guys who are 6'5" to 6'9" and can guard across multiple positions. Those guys are oftentimes going to be on point guards. So for Washington to add this type of player in who could tower over some of those other guards, there's not really an option to hide another team's point guard or shooting guard. For example, if you're facing one of those other teams in the Eastern Conference, maybe a Charlotte Hornets or an Atlanta Hawks, how does Washington get a huge advantage? Well, it's having big, lengthy, long wings who are athletic and can do multiple things on the floor. And I think Risacher with his offensive profile fits that. And then defensively, his length, size, and athleticism, he's not, I've heard the comp Jaden McDaniels. Jaden McDaniels is one heck of a defender. Okay, I don't think Risacher is going to be quite that good defensively, but I do think he has the ability to impact. And a player I am going to compare him to somewhat defensively is Dorian Finney-Smith, someone who I think has really good keep ball in front instincts. I don't know if Risacher is going to be quite the defensive playmaker Jaden McDaniels has been in his career, and I think that's why the comp to Dorian Finney-Smith makes a little bit more sense, because Dorian Finney-Smith, very good screen navigator, very good point of attack defender, a solid, strong team defender who had really good defensive IQ. I think Risacher can fit into that comp a little bit more seamlessly than he does into the Jaden McDaniels comp, but Risacher is a little bit more athletic, I think, than Dorian Finney-Smith, and I also do think has a much better offensive game to work with. Then number 3, the Houston Rockets here at this spot. I actually just recorded a Houston Rockets draft night trades video, so you might want to go check that out. There's a bunch of trades in there that I wouldn't even advise the Rockets to do, but I did talk about some of the potential scenarios, some of the rumors around the team, so that might be something you Rockets fans are interested in. But third overall here, the Rockets have a really great opportunity to add talent that fits their already existing star potential young talent. And for most teams picking the top 3, you're thinking upside, you're thinking players who could blossom into future all-stars, superstars. Well, first of all, this class doesn't have a ton of those potential players anyway. But then secondly, Houston already has a good collection of those guys on their roster. You think about maybe Cam Whitmore, what he could blossom into. My comp for him pre-draft was Jaylen Brown. I think his rookie season really cemented a lot of that comparison for me. And then you also look at some of their other players. Jalen Green really found himself toward the end of the season. Alperen Şengün really had a great year as well. Those two guys got double teamed way more frequently than non-Rockets fans would assume. So I think this Rockets team just needs more floor spacing, one more guy who can create and initiate some offense, but not someone who's going to be reliant on having the basketball. So someone like Nikola Topic just doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Even Rob Dillingham, even though I think Dillingham has off-ball capabilities, he's a little small. And I just don't know if he's quite the off-ball player that I'm going to end up picking here third overall for Houston. And that is other Kentucky guard Reed Sheppard, who, just like Dillingham, is small. That's one of the big concerns for an Ime Udoka defense, is how do you really make a guy like Reed Sheppard work? But offensively, the fit is seamless, the fit is perfect, and that's why I'm mocking him here third overall. He is a lights-out three-point shooter, one of the best in the entire draft, if not the best. And he has other ancillary skills to go along with it. His three-point shooting is what's going to really find him minutes on the court early in his career there for Houston, just because playing next to Fred VanVleet, Jalen Green, two guys who are mid-range shot creators at heart. Obviously, VanVleet has some of that three-point pull-up numbers to back him up as well in terms of being a three-point shot creator. But I think getting more three-point spacing, especially off the basketball around those other two guards, will be important for Sheppard. And what his role would look like there in Houston. I also think he could be very beneficial next to Tari Eason on offensive rebound opportunities and kickouts. Sheppard's going to be someone who cashes those opportunities in, assuming Tari's healthy going into next season. And then you also look at Alperen Şengün, and that's the most important fit to analyze here, because I think Sheppard can fit him in two ways. Obviously, the first point of emphasis everyone's going to focus on is that floor spacing dynamic. Sheppard moves well off the ball. He can lift, he can push into the corner, and he gets his feet set basically every single time. And even if he doesn't, he's still a bucket, and he might put the basketball in the hoop anyway, which at the end of the day, that's really what matters. Scoring more points than the other team, Reed Sheppard will help you do that. But I think the other way that he fits around Alperen Şengün is not just about spacing for him as a post-up player. It's about being a pick-and-roll ball handler in conjunction with Alperen Şengün, who has one of the better floaters in the NBA, really likes that 8 to 10 foot push shot. I think Reed Sheppard, with his skill set as a pull-up jump shooter, can really manipulate a defense. You can put a lot of pressure on drop coverages. Sheppard getting into spots on the floor where his shooting really makes him a threat, both behind the arc and slightly inside of the arc, which opens up Şengün on some of those short rolls, and even on longer rolls, Şengün does a good job sitting in the pocket and waiting for that pass. And Sheppard averaged almost 5 assists per game this past year for Kentucky as an off-the-bench combo guard. He is an extremely talented player. From a dribble, pass, shoot perspective, this kid has it all. If he was 3 or 4 inches taller, he would be the first overall pick in this draft, and I think it would be a pretty much no-brainer. Take advantage of the fact that he's here third overall, Houston. Grab him with this spot, never look back, and the team's going to be a lot better because of it. Pick number 4, we have the San Antonio Spurs here now. And a little disclaimer, in a lot of my mocks, I have had the Spurs go with Nikola Topic, but I do think it is very important to look at the potential scenario in which the team doesn't have Topic as high on their board as maybe we would all expect. Obviously, the Spurs traditionally have loved playmaking, floor general types who can really run an NBA offense and live in facilitation. But I do think with the way that the modern NBA is played, they have a brand new generational talent in Victor Wembanyama. It is important to note that Brian Wright could look in a different direction here for the Spurs, where they look to put more scoring gravity, a little bit more zip and burst around Victor Wembanyama, where they maybe prioritize athleticism, and then with the 8th pick, maybe they prioritize a little bit more upside on the defensive end of the floor. So that's how I went in this mock draft. That's a little bit of a disclaimer here. But 4th overall, I have the San Antonio Spurs selecting guard Rob Dillingham from Kentucky, and I know this is one that I'm sure some Spurs fans are really going to like, especially in the comment section. Let me know down below if you're liking these picks or not. Obviously, some of you will disagree. That's perfectly fine. I don't expect everyone to agree with me. But here we are, 4th overall, the Spurs take Rob Dillingham, and the reason behind it is his scoring gravity as an on-ball player, someone who can really create shots. And it doesn't just go back to his Kentucky film, which was elite, by the way. Some of the shots that he was drilling consistently at Kentucky was insane. Shot 44% on threes, by the way, and a lot of them came on pull-ups and off the dribble shot creation, which is just ridiculous. And he also was very good off the catch. But really, if you go back to even his high school days, his time at Overtime Elite playing for the Cold Hearts, played in the Overtime Elite Championship actually against Amen Thompson and Ausar Thompson a couple of years ago. Rob Dillingham has for a long time had a very good track record of being an elite scorer off the bounce, someone who can create his own look, has probably the best handle in this year's draft. So I think his gravity next to Wembanyama gives you a very dynamic pick and roll game. Obviously, there's been discussion about whether or not the Spurs should trade for Trae Young. This is that alternate universe here where instead of trading for Trae Young, you stick with your picks in this draft, get cheap, young, affordable talent. Rob Dillingham projects to be a very good shot creator, someone who can be an NBA point guard, not only because of his scoring gravity, but also because of his overall feel for the game. He's a very good pick and roll ball handler, someone who can make decisions as a facilitator out of the pick and roll, but really at the heart of his game is that scoring gravity, which is going to put defenses in a bind because, okay, do you want to blitz Dillingham? Do you want to play at the level of the screen? Do you want to not let Dillingham get going? And if you're doing that, does that mean Victor Wembanyama is rolling to the hoop unattended? Or does that mean you have to shrink your entire defense in, which creates open looks for Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson? This is where the benefits of drafting Rob Dillingham really come. A lot more scoring on the floor, real dynamism with an electric ball handler. The Spurs have offense flowing while Victor Wembanyama carries the defense on his shoulders. Number 5, the Detroit Pistons here now. And in last week's mock, well, I mocked the same exact player because I do think there's a very, very good chance that this is who the Pistons draft. From an overall management standpoint, the agent-owner relationships, that's always a big part of this. And the Tellem family is very connected. So 5th overall, I have the Detroit Pistons selecting forward Matas Buzelis from G League Ignite. Now, last week, I saw a lot of comments saying that this is a terrible fit. I understand some of the concerns. Specifically, those people are looking at the three-point percentage for Matas Buzelis, and they're very cautious about putting another non-elite three-point shooter on the court next to Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, and Jalen Duren. And I understand those concerns. But I do want to point something out about Matas Buzelis that I think is going to help the overall spacing, because a lot of people, again, are concerned about that spacing. Matas Buzelis works off the baseline and out of the corner a ton. And you might say, okay, why does that matter? The reason that that's important, you think about where Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey often have the ball. They have the ball above the break. They're playing from the wings or the point. And because of that, that is where the spacing often relies upon, which means Jalen Duren's up there setting screens. And while Matas Buzelis isn't a very good three-point shooter yet, he doesn't prove to be one yet. Maybe there's hope that his jump shot really does come around, and I think there are good things in his mechanics that do make me believe he could at least become a respectable three-point shooter. What really stands out to me, though, is his cutting off of the baseline. So as Cade Cunningham works off the point with a Jalen Duren screen getting Cade to his right hand, and Jalen Duren's operating on a roll, Matas Buzelis might be in the right corner, and as the strong side corner looks to help up onto Cade Cunningham a little bit, Matas Buzelis back cuts for an easy dunk and a layup. Now, it's hard to rely on that offense consistently, which is why I understand some of the concerns, but in my mock drafts, it's not about just who fits, which that's one of the most important parts, but it's also about some of those relationships between owner and agent, some of those relationships between coach and player. Those things all come into effect, obviously. So it's more than just a X's and O's decision, which in the past we've seen teams completely rule that out. Think about the Lakers drafting Jalen Hood-Schifino last year. That made zero sense with their roster. Teams don't always just value X's and O's. They value player relations. They value a ton of different things. So this Matas Buzelis mock pick, even though I'm not completely in love with it, and if you guys saw my big board, you know I don't have Matas Buzelis anywhere near the top 5 right now, I do think overall Detroit would still consider this. Moving on to pick number 6, we have the Charlotte Hornets here now. And the Hornets, I think, are one of those really fascinating situations where this team, I think, with the amount of talent that they have in Brandon Miller, who was just voted as an all-rookie first-team member, very deservingly. He had a great, awesome rookie season. You also look at LaMelo Ball, who I think is one of the more talented guards in this league. Obviously, we need him to stay healthy. Get those ankle braces on. I see you, Hornets Twitter. The Hornets just need to, first of all, stay healthy, and I think they're moving in the direction of putting together a winning product. I think some of their moves at the deadline were very, very smart. I like the fact that they were able to go out and get additional draft assets to work with. They also got a collection of young players. You think Trey Mann, Vasi Micic, who isn't super young, but really found himself a bit with Charlotte. The Hornets are trending in the right direction. Obviously, Mark Williams missed a ton of time as well. So the Hornets, I think, with a new ownership group, new GM, new decision makers in that front office, they're not necessarily tying themselves to any of the past regime's decisions. Now, it doesn't mean that they look at someone like Mark Williams as completely useless and expendable, but it doesn't mean that they're committed to him being the franchise's starting center either. So 6th overall, I have the Charlotte Hornets selecting center Donovan Clingan, who does project to be a true anchor. And I had some discussions with some of the viewers on Twitter, some people who were wondering why Donovan Clingan could be worth a top 3, 4, 5, 6 pick in this year's draft, because everyone looks at him as kind of a low ceiling, high floor prospect. And I do, in some areas, agree with that. But the one thing I will say, Donovan Clingan has some serious upside because he has anchor potential. And even though it's not the flashy step back off the dribble shot creation, even though it's not draining 3-pointers as a 7-footer consistently, those are obviously traits that make people go, whoa, oh my goodness. Donovan Clingan is kind of a feel and defensive-minded upside pick here. He is somebody who could become an awesome elite starting center because of his screen setting, his ability in drop coverage to protect the paint, limit shots at the rim, block shots while still being mobile enough to run the floor well and cover out in space a bit. So you have a little bit of that scheme versatility, not as much with Alex Sarr, but still some. And he measured in at nearly 7'2" without shoes on. So he is just a ginormous, massive human being. At 282 pounds, he sets huge big body screens and he has good passing feel. So even though he's not that flashy, creative center prospect who looks like a Victor Wembanyama dribbling between his legs, behind his back, bringing the ball up the floor, Donovan Clingan has real pro experience from his college days at UConn playing in a pro-style offense. I think this is one of the better picks in this year's draft. Whoever gets Donovan Clingan is going to end up being very, very happy because 8-10 years from now, we're going to look and say, wow, he's just been a really good center basically the entire time. Now, there'll be some growing pains early. He's going to come in, he's going to be a rookie center. It's never just singing Kumbaya, but I think he's going to have an awesome impact early in his career, and I think he's going to be a fantastic center for a long time in the NBA. So I think the Charlotte Hornets, if they draft Donovan Clingan on draft night, I'm going to be very happy for them. This means they're going to have 48 minutes of good, reliable center play, assuming Mark Williams stays healthy. And the team is definitely trending in the right direction going into this offseason. Pick number 7, the Portland Trailblazers now. And this is one of those real pivot points in the draft this year, in my opinion. I think pick number 7 is kind of up in the air. The Blazers have a pretty deep collection of big men. They also have a pretty deep collection of guards. Last week I mocked Stephon Castle, who measured in at 6'5.5" without shoes on, and yet Blazers fans were not happy with me talking about positional versatility, right? Like, the more guys you have that can dribble and defend, the better. That's why Stephon Castle still made sense to me last week, pick number 7. But this week, a different prospect still happens to be on the board, who from an athletic standpoint and a size standpoint does make sense as a real wing forward combo there in Portland alongside Scoot Henderson, Anthony Simons, and Shaedon Sharpe. And that prospect is forward/guard Ron Holland, who measured in at nearly 6'7" without shoes on, which means he's going to be roughly 6'8" when he's playing in NBA games. He's got real true forward size to him. Can slot in as a small forward there for the Portland Trailblazers, who I think are trending in the right direction. Scoot Henderson down the stretch of the year found some real consistency and found a real rhythm for himself. I think he was a huge snub off the all-rookie teams. He averaged over 5 assists per game as a rookie on, not the best assist-to-turnover ratio for sure, but a respectable one for a rookie point guard who really had a lot of kind of bad stuff around him. So for me, I think that honestly, Scoot Henderson has become extremely underrated at this point. Anthony Simons is a quality player as well. The Blazers have some real talent. Now it's about trying to find players who fit around that talent, but still have the upside to maybe blossom and grow into stars. Ron Holland, someone who has some of that two-way upside as a defensive playmaker, someone who wants the basketball and he goes and gets it. I think that stands out to me. And then offensively, one thing that he does really well that maybe I would want to see even Scoot Henderson do more is just an aggression to the rim. Ron Holland is someone who at times just tells himself he's not going to be denied. barrels his way down into the paint. Now that does oftentimes result in turnovers and some questionable decisions, whether it's a bad shot or a bad pass. But I do think overall Ron Holland is somebody who's going to get to the free throw line. He's going to exert rim pressure. He's going to be a dynamic transition player. I can already see Portland becoming a little bit of a Lob City 2.0 with both Holland and Shaedon Sharpe on the wings. It's going to be an impressive combination from an athletic, physical standpoint. And while the young Blazers all kind of grow and develop together, the hope is that they can mesh their skill sets together. Holland has a lot of work to do in still developing his jump shot. That's going to be one of the big questions for him. He did not shoot the ball very well and at times settled for pull-up jump shots. His player prospect profile to me honestly reminds me a little bit of Anthony Edwards, not from a size component, not from who I think he's actually going to end up turning into the NBA, but when I watched Anthony Edwards at Georgia, a lot of his film, a lot of his game tape to me just said, dude, why are you settling for pull-up jump shots? Get to the rim. You're Anthony Edwards. And when I watch Ron Holland, I get that same feeling. I'm like, dude, you're Ron Holland. Go to the rim. And when he does it very, very well and very, very fierce, but I just don't think he does it enough quite yet. So for me, for Portland here, I think this is a huge upside swing. Ron Holland could end up blossoming into one of the best players, if not the best player in this year's draft. He has that kind of potential. I think at 7 here for the Blazers is just about, does he fit your roster? Doesn't really shoot it very much, but I think, are the Blazers more concerned about upside, or are they more concerned about a little bit of shooting touch right now? And I think the upside is what really trumps everything right now for the Blazers with their current rebuild status. Moving on to pick number 8, we're back to the San Antonio Spurs. Notice Nikola Topic is still available, but under this mock draft, I decided that the Spurs would not take Nikola Topic. He has been my most frequent mocked pick for the Spurs, so I wanted to switch it up in this mock draft to talk about other possible scenarios. I do think if Topic was here at 8, it would be really a strong consideration by the Spurs, even with Rob Dillingham. But I have the Spurs going a different direction with a different guard in this year's class, and it's one I could equally see them falling in love with. 8th overall, I have the San Antonio Spurs selecting guard Stephon Castle from UConn, someone who, for the UConn Huskies, made a lot of winning plays and played off the basketball a ton, but also at times was a reliable secondary playmaker. Now, in the last week or so, there's been a lot of reports and rumors coming out that Stephon Castle views himself as a point guard. He wants to go to a team that does not have an established point guard, which is why in this mock draft, he goes 8th overall. It's why a team like Charlotte passes on him, even though I think it would be a great fit, because Stephon Castle supposedly wants to go to a team where he's going to be the point guard. Now, the Spurs, they do have Trey Jones. They already drafted Rob Dillingham in this draft. I think Dillingham and Castle could actually be a really perfect fit and pairing together, because Dillingham has the ability to play off the ball as a spot-up shooter while still being able to have some of that creation offense in his game. And then Castle, I think, specifically bails out Dillingham on the defensive end of the floor a lot with his ability to navigate screens, stay attached to the ball handler, and also that willingness and desire to be the primary defender on some of the best players in the world. So I think Castle here for San Antonio, this is that defense upside. Obviously, I earlier mentioned Victor Wembanyama carrying the defense on his shoulders. That was with the Dillingham selection. Here with Castle, you are helping him quite a bit defensively. With the combination of Castle, Sochan, and Victor Wembanyama, I think you're going to have one of the league's best defenses in a few years. Probably not this next season, but we'll see. Victor Wembanyama is my favorite to win next year's Defensive Player of the Year. I think he's almost a lock for that award, honestly. And I think the Spurs are in a great spot here, where 8th overall, if they get Stephon Castle, they have a guy who has some real upside to him as another creator of offense. I think his handle is extremely underrated. I've said that in a ton of videos this cycle. I really like Castle's game. I think offensively he can be a good fit. As someone who, like a Bruce Brown or a Derek White, just makes a lot of those right plays as a connective passer, someone who has good court vision when he has the ball in his hands, isn't super reliant on his own shot falling to be a productive and effective player in the NBA. I think Stephon Castle is going to be a very reliable pickup for a team, and I think 8th overall, the Spurs make a ton of sense. Pick number 9, the Memphis Grizzlies here now. This is a weird spot as well in these mock drafts. The Grizzlies probably need to find a center. Obviously, Ware is on the board here yet at this point. That could be in consideration for them. But Donovan Clingan would have been the perfect guy. So don't rule out a Grizzlies trade up on draft night, because he would be fantastic there in Memphis. I think he would be a really good screen setter for Ja Morant and the anchor behind Jaren Jackson Jr. that the Grizzlies really do need for their defense, because the defensive player of the year a couple of years ago isn't actually an anchor and doesn't really hold down a defense. He just blocks a ton of shots. I think the Grizzlies are an interesting situation here because, again, if they don't trade up, who do they go with? In this mock draft, I went with a floor spacing shooter type who can really play right away. And, well, Grizzlies fans, you're going to like him quite a bit. You're pretty accustomed to this kid. That is forward Dalton Knecht out of Tennessee. Now, just because he's from Tennessee, playing for the Volunteers, that's not the reason I mocked him here to Memphis, okay? The reason I mocked him to Memphis is because his actual basketball skill set, I think, is a very good and obvious fit next to Ja Morant. Remember, a few years ago, the Memphis Grizzlies spent the 30th overall selection on a fourth-year senior in Desmond Bane. That worked out pretty well, in my opinion. Now here, 9th overall, a bit higher in the draft, but it's a little bit more of a questionable draft. There's some questions near and around the lottery. Someone like Dalton Knecht, who is a real floor spacer, scores a ton in transition, really great as a spot-up threat, but also has a ton of experience as an off-ball mover, working off of floppy action, working off of flare screens, pin downs. You could use him in Spain sets. There's a lot of things Knecht already has real experience doing, that he showcased the ability to be good in those situations. So I think having a player who not only is he age-wise ready to play with a body type to match it, but he's also got the actual on-court experience running plays, running actions in the way that he's going to want to be utilized at the NBA level as well. And then also in his time at Tennessee was asked to do a little bit more than in the NBA he will. He won't be asked to be a primary shot creator and offensive engine like he was for the Volunteers. So his role scalability will probably increase his efficiency a bit, but also gives him the ability to attack closeouts and make extra plays off the bounce when the Grizzlies are in late shot clock situations, which is super important. Honestly, one of the most underrated things about draft prospect evals is how players who project to be three-point shooters mostly in the NBA, do they have other ancillary skills to open up their game when they need to be attacking closeouts? And I think Knecht definitely does. Pick number 10, the Utah Jazz here now, and Danny Ainge has the biggest smile on his face because the team probably really needs a point guard. Since trading Mike Conley, they just haven't had very consistent point guard play. Obviously, Keyonte George assumed that responsibility for the most part this past year. But if we're being honest, and this comes back to my eval in 2023 on Keyonte George, I think he's a combo guard with playmaking skills, but not a true point guard, not a true floor general. Even though he's growing in that area, I just am still a little skeptical on where Utah can go with him as a primary point guard. So the Jazz instead get arguably this draft's best point guard and definitely this draft's best facilitator in guard Nikola Topic from Red Star, a player who has some of the best feel imaginable. He can make any single pass, he can field the floor, he can facilitate to roll men, and I think this is a especially good fit here with the Utah Jazz for a few reasons. First of all, Lauri Markkanen, one of Twitter's favorite players to talk about in trades. He is such an interesting skill set player because over 80% of his shots are actually assisted, which you think, okay, someone who's going to be a 20-plus point per game scorer, typically a lot of their volume comes from on-ball creation. It's actually the opposite here for Lauri Markkanen. So getting a guard who has great positional size and a phenomenal passing skill set where he can see his teammates seemingly behind him, looks like he has eyes on his head, on the back of his head, excuse me. Obviously he has eyes on his head, but eyes on the back of his head where he's able to read the floor and just make, honestly, some advanced professional level reads. It's not a surprise because he's been playing pro basketball now for a while, but he just does it at such an unbelievable mark that's something I'm going to bet on coming into the NBA and adjusting well to the league. And for Utah, a team that traded away some playmaking, getting rid of Kelly Olynyk at the trade deadline, I think not only do they need a point guard, but they just need an excess in playmaking. The NBA is all about playmaking right now. The more guys you have that can create plays off the bounce, the better. And I think the Jazz's best player, Lauri Markkanen, would be most benefited by the addition of Nikola Topic on draft night. Pick number 11, the Chicago Bulls here now at this spot. Obviously, they would have loved to pick up Nikola Topic. He would have been a great pick for them. But with him off the board, where do the Bulls look to go? And we're staying overseas, going with forward Tidjane Salaun, 11th overall for Chicago. And I do like this get for them quite a bit as well. Tidjane Salaun's a player who right now, the jury's still out on. How do we really feel about him as a prospect? Obviously, it comes down to a lot of how much you're going to bet on his three-point shot being a super reliable, useful skill set. If it's not super reliable, if he's a sub 34, 35% three-point shooter, the value is not quite there as a true obvious lottery pick. But he does do a lot of other things well. His overall mobility skills, athletically, he checks a lot of the boxes you're looking for in a four-man. And I think that's exactly why Chicago would look at him here, getting more size into their front court. This team has just been historically a pretty small team. This year they picked up Javonte Green again, and he just comes in and gets like 13 rebounds a game seemingly for them. Tidjane Salaun gives them more size into their front court. I think he could help protect the rim a little bit alongside Nikola Vucevic. Listen, I'm not super high on the Bulls' future. I think the Vucevic trade and extension has obviously caused a ton of problems there with their overall roster construction and team identity. Vucevic just did not have a good season this past year. But one thing I'll say is Billy Donovan played them pretty big at times, playing Drummond and Vucevic together for stretches this season, more than I was expecting to see, that's for sure. I think Tidjane Salaun could definitely be a real power forward for them, though, and I think that's where his skill set, even if he's not super reliable early in his career as a three-point shooter, he's mobile enough off the bounce. He's obviously athletic enough to be a unique defender in the NBA, and I think that's where you find some real value with selecting him 11th overall here, is putting a defensive athletic player in the front court alongside Nikola Vucevic. Pick number 12, we have the Oklahoma City Thunder, and OKC Thunder fans are probably already commenting who the pick should be. Thunder fans, who do you think I'm mocking to you here? I think it should be pretty obvious. 12th overall, the Oklahoma City Thunder select forward Cody Williams from Colorado. Yes, the brother of Jalen Williams, J-Dub, Santa Clara version. And while some Thunder fans are already excited about that, I know there's going to be some comments saying, Cody Williams, you just like him because he's Jalen Williams' brother. No, I don't like him just because he's Jalen Williams' brother. I actually like him because he's a very good driver of the basketball. And if you watch Oklahoma City play, they need guys who are able to catch the ball in the perimeter, attack a closeout, drive, get 2 feet in the paint, and it's either going to lead to another kick-out opportunity for either another three or another drive and kick off of that, which is why OKC's offense is so beautiful. It's really just read and react. It's, are you open? Shoot it. If you're not open, if they're closing out hard on you, get to the paint, kick it out, make a read. That's what Oklahoma City's all about. And Cody Williams, it's really at the heart of basketball. Dribble, pass, shoot. OKC is continuing to load up on these guys who can just dribble, pass, and shoot and have that defensive upside as well. Last year they took Cason Wallace. He was a dribble, pass, shoot prospect with really great length, athletic profile. Obviously does some unique things as well as a screen and roll guy. Honestly, their development staff there in OKC is really smart as well. I had the opportunity to watch some of their pregame workouts this year. With their guards, they're working on a ton of screen and roll stuff where the guard's setting the screen. You might say, well, why are they doing that? First of all, they play that way. They set a lot of small-to-small screens, whether it's ghosts or flares or just flat-out short rolls. And secondly, it puts your playmakers in a spot where they're in the middle of the floor, often working out of advantage. So OKC already has this collection of playmakers. You get Cody Williams in, who has a 7'1" wingspan. I think his measurements definitely stood out for me during the NBA Draft Combine with over a 7-foot wingspan. He projects to be an NBA small forward, someone who, with his driving skill set and I think emerging playmaking feel, he fits perfectly into the way Oklahoma City plays. The Thunder become one of the most dangerous teams in the NBA if they aren't already. Obviously pushed the Mavericks to 6 games. And the Thunder, unlike the Mavericks, aren't all in yet. The Thunder have a lot of ways to get better, improve their roster. I think more size and athleticism in the front court is one of those places to start. Cody Williams isn't one of those athletic power forwards that the Thunder probably badly need, especially someone who can protect the rim a bit around Chet Holmgren. But Cody Williams, what he does do is pretty much everything else really well, or project to do everything else really well, including shoot the ball. He didn't shoot a ton, but he shot it very, very well when he did in college. So I am going to bet on his shooting upside as well at this point in time. Pick 13. The Sacramento Kings here at this spot, and this has become low-key my favorite mock selection on mock draft days, where I'm looking at who teams can pick, and I get to pick 13, and I'm just like, I can't really switch this pick. I just think it makes way too much sense. The Kings are destined to lose Malik Monk here in free agency. They only have early bird rights on him, so because of that, 13th overall, I have the Sacramento Kings once again selecting guard Jared McCain out of Duke. And for a lot of the things I just praised the Oklahoma City Thunder on, the Kings are kind of built in a similar way. They've got players who can play off the catch, players who can play off the handoff. That's most specifically important, playing next to Domantas Sabonis there in Sacramento. And they have a ton of shooting, and they have players who can back cut. I think Jared McCain gives you a lot of those same offensive qualities. Obviously, the shooting is at the forefront of what he's going to provide to an NBA offense. He was an elite shooter for the Blue Devils this past year, very consistent and reliable for their program, and just on a night-to-night basis just was a good shooter. That's really going to be the key element he brings to Sacramento. But if you also look at his numbers as a pick-and-roll ball handler, I think he was surprisingly efficient for me. Coming into this year, I was a little unsure how he was going to perform, where I kind of looked at him as a potential later first-round pick. For me, he has probably cemented himself as a lottery pick, or if not lottery, very near lottery selection. Likely a top 16 pick, I would almost guarantee, just because of his overall talent level. Now, his size didn't stand out at the combine, only measured in at 6'2" without shoes on, so he's not huge. But if you think about the role the Kings are going to need him to fill next to De'Aaron Fox and replacing Malik Monk, size isn't the most important thing here for them. It's about getting someone who has shot-making skills and can do a little bit off of a live handle as well. And I think Jared McCain stands out in that regard a ton here for Sacramento. Number 14, back to the Portland Trailblazers, who earlier went with guard/forward Ron Holland. Now at 14, this pick, again coming from the Golden State Warriors. This pick's been traded multiple times. The Blazers are in a spot where they get to add more talent, and this time a little bit more size, and most specifically rim protection. Even though they have DeAndre Ayton, I think one thing that I really was bummed we didn't get to see very much of this year because of injury was Robert Williams in Portland, and just the impact of a very reliable, big, strong, shot blocking big. What could that do for this Blazers team, who honestly during Chauncey Billups' tenure just hasn't had that? They have not had a transformational defensive type prospect who can jump out of the gym, block shots, and gives you that rim protection that I think they badly need. So 14th overall, I have them going with center Kel'el Ware, who is in no means an anchor at this point in time, but I do think has qualities to, almost like Derek Lively has been for the Dallas Mavericks, be a rim deterrent, a shot blocker, make some wow plays with his athleticism, size, and length. Kel'el Ware, I think, has a really impressive overall composition of physical traits with his overall size, length, athleticism. He jumps out of the gym. And I think, honestly, in his collegiate time, hasn't been asked to utilize those as much as I think he's really capable of as both a lob threat offensively and as a shot blocker defensively. Now, he blocked a ton of shots for Indiana, but I think he could even be better than he was if he's put into the right system, right scheme. And then think about offensively there for the Hoosiers, Mike Woodson, a big-time believer in post-up play. Of course, he stuck Kel'el Ware in the post immediately. And Kel'el Ware has good touch. He was very successful in that as a post-up player with both his right and left hand. So not diminishing that decision from Mike Woodson. He's trying to win college games. But I think there's more in Kel'el Ware's game that fits the pro-styled offense as a lob threat, rim runner, rim protector on the defensive end. I think that Kel'el Ware is going to be someone who translates very well to the NBA. I think he's got a real pro-ready skill set and pro-ready athletic traits that are going to make him an awesome pickup here for Portland. And my assumption here is they maybe trade one of Ayton or Robert Williams, probably more so Robert Williams, honestly. Pick number 15, the Miami Heat here now. At this spot in the draft, the Heat have a chance to add someone who can either help them compete right now or pick for some upside that's left on the board. 15th overall, I have them going with guard Devin Carter here, who maybe fits a little bit of both of those traits. He has some upside to him, but he's also, I think, a pro-ready contributor. Now, they did trade for Terry Rozier at the deadline, but in that deal, they also gave up Kyle Lowry, and I still think they could use one more guard in their backcourt who is reliable, both shot maker and shot defender, and Devin Carter really projects to be both of those things. At Providence, he created a vast amount of the Friars' offensive looks, so he has a lot of experience as an on-ball usage player, but I think his skills really do translate well as an off-ball player too, where I think he'll be more effective scaling his role down a little bit as a three-point shooter. Had very good pull-up volume and very good pull-up efficiency, but even if you kind of look at the way he plays, and if you maybe minimize his role just a little bit, instead of just his overall three-point percentage reflecting good three-point pull-up percentage, his three-point percentage overall might just be pretty good. So I think for the Heat offensively, he could be a fit player while also still giving you some of that pull-up game that's been obviously very valuable for the Heat over the last few years, whether that's from Jimmy Butler or Bam Adebayo on some of his floaters, not talking just dribble pull-ups, but pulling up in front of the defense on floaters. And then defensively, Devin Carter does a good job staying attached to the offensive player, navigates screens decently well, but I think has a real want to in his game when it comes to blocking shots, limiting opponents at the rim. I believe his matchup shot sub 50% at the rim, which is just unbelievable for a guard, honestly. So Devin Carter, just honestly a very good prospect, a very solid prospect who can help Miami both now and later if he takes his game to the next level. There's maybe like a false ceiling here for Devin Carter. That's not something I say very much, but I think, people are going to limit him because of his age and his overall college experience. They're going to say, okay, well, you kind of know what you're getting. I think his skill set suggests that there could be a lot more in the tank as well. So I wouldn't put a ceiling on Devin Carter yet at this point. I think there's a lot of talent to work with there, and Miami's been known for getting the most out of players too. So I think Devin Carter could just be tremendous there with the Heat moving forward. Pick number 16. The Philadelphia 76ers here now. This is a team that is looking for cheap, young, affordable talent. If they don't trade this pick, which there's a real possibility they do, the Sixers have the chance here to draft someone who's going to be on a cheap, affordable rookie contract, put him next to Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey for the next few years, and probably use them early in their career as an off-the-bench contributor. And that player, 16th overall, is forward/center Kyle Filipowski from Duke. They obviously have Paul Reed as well. This is really one of the final pieces into their front court to give them more length and size. And you think about taking down some of the other teams in the Eastern Conference, Kyle Filipowski's length and size would be a pretty unique advantage over Boston, a team that plays more wings than bigs and a team that also relies on some guard play there in Boston. I think Filipowski at nearly 7 feet tall with shoes on would be a pretty solid get for them as a power forward next to Embiid for stretches, next to Paul Reed as well for stretches. I think his floor spacing and role scalability, again, like I talked about with Devin Carter, I think role scalability is really at the heart of my belief in Kyle Filipowski, is that instead of being a primary creator for the Duke offense, he's playing more so off the catch for Philadelphia, and that's where his efficiency is probably going to bubble up a little bit. He's going to get some easier looks. Instead of being the main scouting report topic for college teams, he's like the 12th guy on the list probably in the NBA. Maybe not that low. He's probably like the 7th, 8th guy on the list for Philadelphia. So that's where the value is going to be in him, is just his ability to create a little bit, but do so in a lesser volume. And I think with that, he's going to find a little bit more continued success in the NBA, even than he did in college. He was a very good college player. Pick number 17, we have the Los Angeles Lakers here. Now, I do have to note this pick, by June 1st, we'll for sure know if it's the Lakers pick or the Pelicans pick. The Pelicans could still decide to take this year's pick and not next year's. But with all things being how they are, the Lakers are a playoff team. The Pelicans probably believe this next draft, 2025, is stronger than 2024. They're definitely right about that as well, by the way. Overall, I think that the Pelicans are going to wait to take the pick. So this year's pick will probably belong to the Lakers. I just got done talking about a very good college player in Kyle Filipowski. How about we talk about a great college player? 17th overall, I have the Los Angeles Lakers selecting center Zach Edey from Purdue. And this is either going to get met with a lot of love or a lot of criticism. Let's address the criticism now. I know people are going to say, oh my gosh, Zach Edey, you're not going to space the floor. Listen, I'm not the highest guy on Zach Edey either, but he has very, very translatable skills that will be important and impactful at the NBA level. You want to know what Zach Edey does really well? Be huge, protect the rim, catch, finish. And I know those things sound super basic, and my analysis usually doesn't get dumbed down to catching the ball and scoring. Zach Edey's good at that, okay? As a roller and as someone who loves Rudy Gobert, having a big man who can catch the ball is extremely important, okay? Zach Edey reminds me a lot of Ivica Zubac, who Lakers fans should know pretty well, now playing for the Clippers and honestly having a very good career for himself. I think Zach Edey is a slightly less mobile, quite a bit bigger version of Ivica Zubac, someone who reliable hands, has very good right-handed touch, can finish floaters, can finish above the rim, can finish below the rim with that touch, has a reliable right-hand baby hook. No, the Lakers are not going to give him post-ups, but playing next to LeBron James, Zach Edey could be an elite screen setter. And here's the news flash for the Lakers fans. Why does Zach Edey make sense? The Lakers continued to get bodied by the Denver Nuggets every time they play them. The reason for that is they are too small. The last time they beat the Denver Nuggets, they had Dwight Howard and JaVale McGee on their roster next to Anthony Davis. You need to have two big men. The Minnesota Timberwolves just proved that. You need to have two real, huge big men who can defend, protect the rim, to have a chance at beating a Nikola Jokic team, especially with Aaron Gordon at power forward. So Zach Edey in these matchups, whether you're starting him, bringing him off the bench, whatever role you're looking at, probably bringing him off the bench, you put him on Aaron Gordon for stretches of time. You put Anthony Davis's body on Nikola Jokic's body. Edey's there to hopefully either block a shot at the rim or at least get another contest on Jokic, make his life a little bit harder. Edey's so big that he can limit those lobs to Gordon as well. This is a very designed pick to try and beat Denver, and it might seem short-sighted for the Lakers to do something like that. Here's the thing. You have a near 40-year-old superstar, and the team you can't beat is the Denver Nuggets. If you want to get to the finals, you're going to have to at some point either beat the Nuggets or beat the team that beat the Nuggets, which might just be the Timberwolves for the next few years. You're going to need size. Zach Edey makes sense for that. I think his hands, I think he could form a dynamic high-low game with Anthony Davis, who has that kind of playmaking skill set. Edey doesn't have the potential to be a megastar, but Edey probably slots into being a quality NBA big man for probably at least 10 years in the NBA, which makes him worthwhile a first-round pick in this year's draft. Pick number 18, the Orlando Magic, now at this spot. And listen, Magic fans, first of all, you should be extremely excited. Paolo Banchero really cemented himself this year as an awesome franchise-defining player. And Orlando, with that, now finally having that kind of guy, they also have some really great pieces around him. Jalen Suggs, Franz Wagner. I know a lot of the criticism on Wagner has been his three-point shot. I think Wagner did a lot of still very good things, and I think Wagner is extremely underrated in his overall game. I think he's a great two-way player, a great two-way wing who's going to continue to be a staple of Orlando Magic basketball. And I think these early years were great for Orlando. They were able to give a lot of the ball handling and creation opportunities to both Wagner and Banchero for their personal and professional development, and we've seen a ton of that. But now Orlando, it's time to shift gears. You want to try and win playoff series, and you need a guard who is capable of creating consistent offense at the NBA level. No, it's not Markelle Fultz. Even though I liked Anthony Black a lot last year, it's probably not Anthony Black, who projects to be more of a defensive monster, which I think is still great for Orlando. I think it was a great pick last year. Orlando, 18th overall here, gets someone who's going to be an offensive engine for them, can create offense, and most specifically can still play off of Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner. You don't want to siphon away all of those ball handling responsibilities, so you need someone who can also shoot the ball, play off the catch as well. That's why 18th overall I have the Orlando Magic selecting guard Ajay Mitchell, one of my favorite players in this year's draft. Was a awesome college player for UC Santa Barbara, ranked in the 90th plus percentile in pick and roll ball handler efficiency, also ranked in the 97th percentile in pick and roll ball handler volume. He ranked in the 90th percentile as an isolation scorer. He is an elite ball handler, creator out of the pick and roll, creator out of isolation. He does all of those things extremely well. Oh, and by the way, he ranked in the 80th plus percentile as a spot up shooter. So Ajay Mitchell is overall just a flat out good basketball player, the heart and the epitome of dribble, pass, shoot in this year's draft. He's not huge. He stands at 6'3.5". He's a prototypical size point guard. He's going to be a quality NBA player for a very long time, someone that the Orlando Magic can very much rely upon. This is getting a shooter in the building. He shot about 39% from three this past year. This is getting a shooter, if you're Orlando, without just drafting purely a shooter. Ajay Mitchell can handle, he can score, he can facilitate, he can dribble, he can pass, he can do it all as an offensive player. There are some defensive deficiencies. His numbers don't really look very good, but I think he's a competitive defender. My closest comp to Jalen Brunson is Ajay Mitchell. And I think that if you're Orlando, getting someone who can create offense but still thrive off the ball as well is the most important decision that they can make. Getting Ajay Mitchell 18th overall is an absolute home run for this franchise. Pick number 19, we have the Toronto Raptors here now, and Masai Ujiri typically loves to look at size, length, physical traits that really impress, and also started to dabble in some shooting as well, which is great. He drafted Grady Dick last year, traded for Kelly Olynyk this year. He's getting more shooting in the building. We're going to continue that pathway with those physical athletic traits as well as some of that shooting, and we're going to land on forward Tyler Smith here, who is a unique face-up four-man who can put the ball on the deck a little bit, score for himself, create off the dribble as a downhill finisher, while also having a pretty impressive three-point shot diet. Now, obviously, I think too much of his shot diet relies on mid-range jump shots, but he did shoot 4 threes per game this past year for the Ignite program. Wasn't the most efficient, shot about 35% from 3 on those. But remember, that's playing against professional players without a real point guard on that Ignite team. And he was playing on the NBA three-point line. So those are all traits that, to me, suggest he's going to hopefully be able to translate decently well to the NBA with hopeful real three-point volume and hopefully some pretty solid success as a three-point shooter early in his career as well. And for Toronto, a team that already is kind of loaded with athleticism, you think about Scottie Barnes, who is one of the unique two-way players in the world that can make plays on both ends of the ball with it either in his hands or as a cutter. And obviously some of his rejections this year and blocks were just unbelievable. It felt like a highlight reel every time I just watched a flat-out Scottie Barnes Toronto Raptors game because he's just that good of a player. Now you're getting someone who has some of those same athletic traits, some of those physicals, but also an emerging shooting touch in Tyler Smith, who could become a pretty special player if given the right amount of time to really grow and blossom his game. I think next to Emmanuel Quickley, next to Ajay Barrett, next to Scottie Barnes, Tyler Smith is the right pick here, 19th overall. Moving on to pick number 20, we have the Cleveland Cavaliers here, and there's a little bit of drama about their point guard spot. Will Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell break up this offseason? I think there's a real chance that that does happen. So Cleveland, with a little bit of forward thinking, actually looks at a point guard in this mock draft, and they select guard Isaiah Collier from USC, former top recruit coming into this year's draft cycle, someone a lot of people, even currently, still believe might be a top 3 pick. I can't believe that, honestly, because I don't look at him like that at all. But I could see the Cavaliers selling themselves on the upside here, where they probably aren't going to have a ton more lottery picks coming forward. With Evan Mobley, Jared Allen, Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, whichever of those core 4 stay there in Cleveland, you're projecting to be a playoff team, or at least a very good team. So the Cavs, who aren't going to have a lot of opportunities at former top recruits, they get one here in Isaiah Collier, who there are traits to love about him. You know, a lot of my analysis on Collier has been unfortunately very critical. I think for me, it's just because I'm lower than where the consensus is, so I have to kind of explain my rationale for that. But there are things to love. First of all, he has an elite first step. He is extremely quick, plays with a ton of burst, and he understands his game pretty well. He knows that he is best when he's getting to the rim. That's a great trait to start with. Then off of that, when he gets his 2 feet in the paint, which he does very consistently, he also understands that he's a very good passer, and he's able to make reads, kick it out to shooters. Now, USC didn't have a ton of shooters around him. They didn't have a ton of floor spacing. Their bigs kind of ate paint space. I think Isaiah Collier in the perfect setting, which probably isn't Cleveland, unfortunately, but in the perfect setting could become a pretty unique point guard in today's game, just with how many of the point guards currently shoot the basketball extremely well. Isaiah Collier is more of an inside-out player, okay? So I think for Cleveland, it's an interesting fit, but it's an upside grab for them, which is why I do mock him here 20th overall. But ultimately, I think Collier, I'm not sure how great the fit will be in Cleveland, and obviously there's a lot of questions about how they build and construct their roster. But if they do move Evan Mobley to center and trade Jared Allen, maybe Collier does actually make a good deal of sense for the Cavs at 20. Pick 21, we have the New Orleans Pelicans here. Now, they also would have been an interesting Isaiah Collier spot, but instead, now they have to look in a different direction. And I think Pelicans fans, there's some that understand that this team doesn't necessarily need to have a three-point shooting big man to find success. Obviously, it'd be nice if you have a big man who can do everything. That would be great. And that's what we're going to end up taking here. I don't think it's necessarily essential for them to find the success by having a purely only shooting big man. But they are going to get someone who can shoot here in Day'Ron Holmes II from Dayton. 21st overall, I do like his skill set a lot, and I do think he would be a very good fit in New Orleans because during his time with Dayton, he set a ton of ball screens. He's a 3-year player, junior coming into this year's draft, and his primary skill and primary usage play style there in Dayton was pick and roll man. So for New Orleans, who runs a ton of zoom actions with their big at the top of the key, kind of ushering into dribble handoffs and then rolling to the hoop, Day'Ron Holmes II not only is athletic enough to get downhill quickly and present himself as a lob threat and a rim threat around guys like CJ McCollum and Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson, but he also has a popping game where he could become a very dynamic fit with Zion, because if teams are trying to maybe switch their big onto Zion, Then Day'Ron Holmes II all of a sudden has a mismatch on post-ups if you want to feed him against a smaller player. Or you could also have Day'Ron Holmes II beating drop coverage by just popping out to the three-point line and shooting a bunch of threes, where he was also rather efficient this past year. I do think he's a pretty clean and tight fit into New Orleans' current team and system. So for that reason, a team like the Pelicans, who are looking to win now and trying to make advances on their roster, I think Day'Ron Holmes II does make a good deal of sense, 21st overall. Pick 22, we have the Phoenix Suns here, and at this pick, it really comes down to what Mike Budenholzer, James Jones, and Matt Ishbia want to have done. Now, Matt Ishbia, I think, is a big believer in not drafting a point guard, not trading for a point guard, not having a point guard, because he wants Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and Bradley Beal to have the ball. However, in the playoffs, we saw the deficiencies of that and how not having a point guard makes it harder to run an offense. They had the worst fourth quarter offense in the entire NBA. I think the big reason why is they didn't have a point guard. They just weren't as organized. I think Frank Vogel was working with a really broken deck. This team was not very good. I've been saying that for a long time. They have a lot of top-end talent, but the team itself was not good. And the Suns now have an opportunity to add some talent. And with Mike Budenholzer, the new head coach there, making a lot of money, I think he's going to have a good deal of say here in this draft. And if the Suns do keep this pick, which is a chance they trade it, if they do keep this pick, I will look at them maybe drafting a point guard. I have them going with Bub Carrington from Pittsburgh, someone who, to me, offensively, a little reminiscent of DeJounte Murray. Now, he's not the defensive prospect DeJounte Murray was, doesn't have quite the length to him or the defensive upside, but offensively, he can really live off of a pull-up jump shooting diet. And you look at what DeJounte Murray's become elite at in the NBA, it's his pull-up jump shooting, beating drop coverage by rising into 18, 15-foot pull-up jump shots. Now, you might say, well, where does that get you? For Phoenix, the answer is it gets you one more guy who can create, which as teams throw doubles at Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, as teams trying to put their best perimeter defenders on those guys, Carlton Carrington being able to create his own shot at about 6'4", 6'5" with shoes on, he becomes a problem himself, where teams who have their lesser defenders on him, he's going to be able to score, create a shot, but also still facilitate an offense, average over 5 assists per game this past year for the Pittsburgh Panthers. Somebody who also can get on the glass. I think that's something Phoenix needs a little bit more help with. Getting a guard who can rebound would be very effective for them. Against the Timberwolves, they gave up 40% offensive rebounding rate, which is just absurd. So Phoenix has a lot of work to do in improving their roster. Luckily for them, not only is Carrington a point guard, but he's a point guard who does multiple things. He rebounds, he facilitates. He is one of those players who, if that jump shot continues to progress, could be a really good fit onto the Suns roster. Number 23, we have the Milwaukee Bucks. And talking about flawed rosters, the Bucks right here as well in this conversation. We'll see if Doc Rivers plays MarJon Beauchamp and Andre Jackson Jr. going into next season. I think that would help them a ton. Those athletes next to Giannis, Dame, and Middleton, I think would be really beneficial. The Bucks just right now, I think, especially one of my big concerns for them is how they have real flexibility with how they want to defend. With Brook Lopez, it's pretty obvious. You're going to be in deep drop coverage. He's going to sit way back, way off the level of the screen. And I think teams were just way too comfortable. Not only did the Bucks not have the screen navigators to really challenge that before getting Patrick Beverley, but teams just know that if you're in drop coverage, they know where the open shots are going to be. They can walk into them with confidence saying, I know as soon as I get off this screen, instead of having to read and react to a defense, I just know what's going to be open. So I think Milwaukee, what they do need really badly is a backup big man who can switch up the scheme, who can do different things, and really throw wrenches into other teams' game planning and other guards' abilities to know what they're going to face coming off the screen. So 23rd overall, I have center Yves Missi, who has one of the most polarizing and impressive physical combination of traits in this year's draft. As an extreme athlete, someone who can really jump. He's a powerful leaper, jumps off of 2 feet really well, jumps off of 1 foot really well. If you look at his shot blocking highlight reel, you're going to say, oh my goodness, why is this guy not a top 10 pick? He makes some unbelievable plays. Now, he's really raw yet. He's newer to basketball. I believe he's only been playing for about 5 years or so. He is raw, okay? But he's got a lot of tools that really impress me. And if you look at the Bucks' recent drafting history, it's drafting guys who have athletic, physical traits who you project to become capable of growing into good basketball players. And I think the Bucks here stick with that philosophy. Drafting Yves Missi gives you a backup big man who can play alongside Giannis as a lob threat. This doesn't give you the floor spacing that Brook Lopez obviously provides, which is important. but it does defensively give you a guy who can block more shots, just like Brook Lopez does, but is also athletic enough to put out on the perimeter. You can maybe even soft switch with him a little bit, but you can really use him as a blitzer. There's ways to employ Yves Missi that I think just flat out makes sense for Milwaukee, and I think this is a huge need for them. 2 straight playoffs now, we've seen pick and pops really kill them, or dribble handoffs kill them, whether that's Duncan Robinson with the Heat 2 years ago under Budenholzer, or this past year under Doc with Miles Turner just shooting open shots pretty much every single possession. The Bucks need more athleticism in the front court. They need a little bit more length and size and shot blocking outside of Lopez and Giannis, and they get it here with Yves Missi, 23rd overall. 24th, we have the Knicks, who have back-to-back picks in this year's draft. This 24th pick comes from the Dallas Mavericks, the final asset still owed to New York from the Kristaps Porzingis trade, maybe now named the Tim Hardaway Jr. trade because he's the only player still with the Mavericks as well. But here we are. Forward Tristan da Silva out of Colorado, I think, makes a good deal of sense for the Knicks, who were just really battered by injuries this past season. I think the Knicks, who a team that would have been a real threat to Boston had they stayed healthy with OG Anunoby, Josh Hart, obviously sustaining injuries, Mitchell Robinson, just a real injury-prone year for the Knicks this season. Drafting an older prospect who has a little bit of that playmaking capability to him, but also just a very good shooter and a reliable role player. Fitting him into New York, giving Tibbs, who probably won't ever play him because Tibbs only believes in playing like 6.5 guys anyway in the playoffs, giving Tristan da Silva to the Knicks is just a really surefire, safe option of, okay, going into next year, they have Bojan Bogdanovic's contract, which is tradable. Let's get one more wing in here who has a skill set to play right away. Give us a little bit more depth. Maybe in the regular season, we don't have to play our guys 37, 38 minutes a night. Maybe we can usher them down to 35, 36, 34 minutes. That would be great. Maybe save their legs and their bodies a little bit for the postseason. Tristan da Silva, though, from a skill set perspective, is pretty ready to play in the NBA. Now, I have questions about his athletic traits. Is he strong enough? Is he physically athletic enough to play in the NBA? And is he going to get targeted to death defensively? That's really the big question I have. But overall, Tristan da Silva, he has the skill set, he has touch with pretty decent size and solid enough athleticism that I am going to respect him here. 24th overall for the Knicks, I do think it's a pretty solid pickup. And then 25th, staying on the New York Knicks, how do they look to build on that? I think one of the big questions is Isaiah Hartenstein's long-term tenure. Is he going to stay in New York? What kind of contract does that look like? Does a team just want to come out and pay him a ton of money? I think the answer is very possibly yes to that. So 25th overall, I have the New York Knicks going with center Adem Bona from UCLA. And for a lot of the reasons I highlighted on Yves Missi, I think Adem Bona is a more NBA-ready player, a more NBA-ready prospect, because he has some of that similar freakish athletic bounce. This is a real strong 2-foot jumper. He really jumps out of the gym. Adem Bona is an absolute freak. He showed that in the combine scrimmages, threw down a massive dunk in one of the scrimmage games. And then defensively, I think showcased at UCLA a lot of the film that scouts and evaluators wish we got to see as much from Yves Missi in his freshman season. Adem Bona, as a sophomore, has a ton of really great tape, both in drop coverage as a weak side rim protector. He just jumps out of the gym and can really challenge shots at the rack as a low tag man. And then also really switchy. Not someone who you're going to just ask to go guard guards or anything like that. Those players are very, very rare. The common theme draft every year is, oh, this guy can guard 1 through 5. There's like 2 players in the world that can do that, okay? Players can't just flat out guard 1 through 5 super consistently. But Adem Bona, you can hedge with him, you can blitz with him, he can survive out in space occasionally with guards. I think that just overall his freakish athletic profile makes sense as a third center for the Knicks if they keep Hartenstein. But if they lose Hartenstein, they need someone with that kind of scheme versatility like Hartenstein gives them. Adem Bona definitely projects to be one of those players who can help them in that regard. 26, we are on to the Washington Wizards. This pick comes from the LA Clippers, part of the Daniel Gafford trade. So now the Wizards, who earlier in this draft went with Zaccharie Risacher, have a chance to add some more talent, maybe some more upside, and that's exactly what they're going to grab here, grabbing Mega Baskets guard Nikola 26th overall. And he has a little bit of flair and creativity into his game. Some Wizards fans probably wanted to see Nikola Topic go 2nd overall to the Wizards. Instead, here they get a guard in Nikola Jurisic, who has some of that same playmaking feel. Now, his is far less reliable. I think with looking at his overall volume this past year for Mega Basket, playing for Mega Mies, he is somebody who, honestly, to me, just like, he has that pizzazz in his playmaking. He has some moments where you can tell he's really like able to read the floor, but there's also some questionable decisions, some turnovers that I'm like, oh, well, okay, what's this guy real ability as a floor general, decision maker, lead ball handler? But what I do think is important for him in his time at the combine, first of all, I measured in at 6'7" with a 6'8" wingspan, so he's got solid NBA respectable size, and he really showcased the ability to play off the catch more than I was expecting. So you're not drafting Jurisic to be strictly a point guard. You're drafting him under the idea that he's going to be able to create some offense for you as another initiator, another creator, without necessarily being labeled a point guard. And that's where the value comes from him. He's big enough, long enough to guard multiple different positions. Athletically showed some functional athleticism, threw down a couple of dunks during the combine scrimmages as well. I think that was one of the big questions for him, is how does he look physically compared to some of these other NBA draft prospects. He definitely passed the test as well there. So Jurisic, to me, makes a good deal of sense for the Wizards as an upside grab, 26th overall. 27 now, we are looking at the Minnesota Timberwolves, who are in their first conference final since the 2003-2004 season. Let's get a round of applause for the Minnesota Timberwolves. And you guys probably owe Rudy Gobert and Tim Connolly a little bit of an apology. I was one of the few people on YouTube a few years ago to be hyping up the Rudy Gobert trade, saying it was genius for the Minnesota Timberwolves. I was met with a lot of criticism and honestly some hate comments because that was not a very well-liked opinion at the time. Well, a couple of years later, look who just beat the reigning champion Denver Nuggets. Anyway, the Timberwolves here, 27th overall. They're looking to add an NBA-ready player, someone who can contribute. And one of the biggest MOs in that front office, and especially that coaching staff under Chris Finch, is the value of playmaking. You look at their team, they have a ton of guys who can create offense, playmake. Anthony Edwards has taken a huge step forward in that regard this year, but obviously Mike Conley is the epitome of that there for that organization. Slow-Mo, someone who creates a lot of offense. He's an unrestricted free agent this offseason and likely will not be back in Minnesota if I had to guess. Nickeil Alexander-Walker can play make. Nasri can handle. Cat's a pretty good passing big man. They have a ton of playmakers. I haven't even mentioned Monte Morris, Jordan McLaughlin yet. The team believes in playmaking. That is really how they play on offense. Just kind of freestyle, a lot of ball movement, a lot of player movement. And as a result, they sometimes get to the right answer. Now, they don't have the elite 1A Luka Doncic type of playmaker, but they have a lot of playmakers around that. So 27th overall, I have the Minnesota Timberwolves going with another guy who is capable of creating shots for others here in forward Baylor Shireman from Cretin. Started his college career at South Dakota State as a jackrabbit and really caught my eyes a few years ago. I've been watching Baylor Shireman for a long time, and I have been very impressed with his overall tape and film because he is a wing at about 6'7", who can shoot the basketball very, very well, by the way, but still really knows how to handle and create offense for others. My comp for him, and it's been a comp that I've had running for 3 years now, is Joe Ingles. And while that doesn't sound like the most sexy pick or the craziest, Joe Ingles has been proven time and time again to be a quality NBA player. It was a part of some really great Utah Jazz teams as a starter. I think the Timberwolves here, who are going to be looking for cheap, NBA-ready players, Baylor Shireman is a no-brainer. Not only can he play, make, and create, they're going to have to replace some of that Kyle Anderson offense creation that's been super important for them this year. But he's also got a very good experience working with a lob-catching big man in Ryan Kalkbrenner there with the Cretin Blue Jays. I think his fit with Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns would be very, very, very good as well. And then I think offensively, when Anthony Edwards has the ball or when Mike Conley has the ball, Shireman's shooting is where you're going to find some of that value as well, with him being an off-ball threat. He's not the super high upside player, but he's a pick-and-play type of guy, 27th overall, as the Timberwolves have some cap space concerns and some real cap table problems, honestly, coming up. Finding cheap, affordable, playable talent is at the forefront of concerns there in Minnesota. Baylor Shireman should be a no-brainer decision, 27th overall for the Wolves, who I trust to make the right decision. I trust Tim Connolly's eyes. I think this is the right pick. Pick 28, the Denver Nuggets here now, obviously a disappointing end to their season in the Game 7 loss where they had a 20-point lead in the second half, ended up blowing it in front of their home crowd. And honestly, a team that I think most people expected to be a defending champ with the real opportunity to repeat this year, they came up short on those aspirations. So 28th overall, it's an important pick for the Nuggets. They're going to get a player who has some real upside, some good length, and most importantly, shooting. 28th overall, I have the Nuggets going with guard Jacoby Walter from Baylor. And Jacoby Walter, someone who early in the process I looked at as a possible lottery pick for some of the same reasons Jordan Hawkins was last year. Someone who has really good shooting touch with a ton of three-point volume. Now, Walter, in his freshman season for Baylor, had some awesome moments like that, but didn't consistently cash out those three-point opportunities to the rate that you would justify him being a lottery pick. Measured in about 6'4" without shoes on at the combine, which means he's a true shooting guard size player. He's going to be around 6'5" with shoes on an NBA floor. And then with that, I think the hope here around Denver is just putting more shooting on the floor, especially from their role players. Think about their starting five, very, very good starting five. That was not the problem really for the Nuggets for the most part in this series. Nikola Jokic was great. Jamal Murray was up and down, but overall had a really good series and a very good Game 7. Now, I know Michael Porter Jr. struggled. I think that's more about the Timberwolves trying to eliminate him from the game than it is MPJ himself. KCP had his moments, and Aaron Gordon had his moments as well in that series. The real downside for the Nuggets, though, Justin Holiday was their most reliable bench player. And the reason why is he was the only bench player who could really consistently shoot the ball. Christian Brown hesitated, didn't really feel comfortable shooting. Peyton Watson obviously didn't even get into games really because he couldn't shoot. The Nuggets need more shooting off the bench. They get it here with guard Jacoby Walter. It's a very functional fit. This helps them going into next season. They also have Hunter Tyson, Julian Strawther, who might take steps forward and get some minutes. The Nuggets need more shooting. They get Jacoby Walter here, who's going to help them in that regard. I think someone who can play in his rookie season. He's not going to play a ton of playoff minutes, but I think he gives at least Michael Malone one more option off the bench as a shooter next to the Jokic-Murray pick and roll. Pick number 29, we have the Utah Jazz here. Now, with this pick, remember earlier they went with Nikola Topic, so it's all gravy here for the Jazz, who already have had a great draft in my opinion. And 29th overall, this pick coming from the Thunder, they select forward Johnny Furphy from Kansas. And one thing about the Utah Jazz in general, they are devoid of wings. They just don't have a ton of wings on their roster. In fact, they basically have none. After trading Simone Fontecchio away, they basically have some guards and some forwards / centers. Like maybe Taylor Hendricks is their closest thing to a wing, although even then I wouldn't really classify him as a wing. I'd classify him as a forward. So getting a wing here in Johnny Furphy, who stands at about 6'7", can really shoot the basketball. That's his greatest skill set coming into the league, is he's a shooter. But he can also finish at the rim. He can attack closeouts. This is a really safe 3-and-D-ish role player. He's not really 3-and-D because he's not going to be the best defensive player in the draft or anything crazy like that. But I think he can be a competent team defender. For Utah here specifically, though, again, you already drafted Nikola Topic. Lauri Markkanen's already a great floor spacer. Let's get more shooting, more length, more athleticism on the court. Johnny Furphy fits that description pretty well here for Utah. I also thought about Justin Edwards from Kentucky. You could go a bunch of different ways here. You could look at someone like Jalen Tyson. There's options here in this draft. I landed on Johnny Furphy here at this spot, though, and the Jazz could maybe still look at 31 to make something else happen. Pick number 30. Here we are with the Boston Celtics. Now, final pick of the first round. I hope you guys have really enjoyed this video. And 30th overall, I have the Celtics selecting forward Ryan Dunn from Virginia. Now, if I had to bet money on this pick, I would first of all bet that the Celtics trade out of this pick for second rounders. That would be almost a guarantee. And then secondly, I think that the Celtics are going to look for someone with defensive traits with some hope for offensive upside. And Ryan Dunn's offensive upside is his finishing at the rim. That's really what he's very good at right now. He's an extremely great, gifted athletic prospect who finished at the rim extremely well for a team that typically is a terrible offense because they are coached to have a terrible offense. They don't care about scoring the basketball. As long as you can win the game 29-28, you did your job. And that's how the way Virginia Cavaliers basketball goes. Now, Ryan Dunn doesn't have a lot of offensive skill set outside of finishing at the rim. He maximizes his athleticism as a cutter and a transition finisher. There's a lot of work to do. And I think the Celtics are one of the few teams who have the ability to draft here with the patience to wait for Ryan Dunn. He's going to need to shoot 1,000 jump shots a day. Okay, he needs to reform his jump shot. He needs to build upon it, grow. If he gets to a respectable 33% from three at any point in his NBA career, he is a home run steal pick here for the Celtics. That's why I mocked him here. I think Brad Stevens, looking at this is an opportunity to get a player who, from his defensive tape alone, you could make a justification for him to be a lottery level player in this draft. Now, offensively, The tape does not suggest that at all. The tape suggests he should go undrafted. So that's why he's kind of finding himself in the middle. He's not a lottery pick. He's not going undrafted. He's going 30th. Because there's upside here. If you get this right, if Boston's able to build his jump shot up, instill confidence in him as a shooter, and make him a reliable off-ball corner sitter even, kind of like Dorian Finney-Smith. Think about Dorian Finney-Smith coming out of Florida. Could not shoot the ball a lick. Now he's known as one of the best 3-and-D wing players in the league. Ryan Dunn has a better defensive tape than almost anyone I've ever evaluated. If you get it right with him, if you develop his jump shot, he becomes a massive home run get for a team. Boston has the ability to not only draft him here, but to also be patient with him, play him in Maine a lot for their G League program. There's no rush here with Ryan Dunn. You draft him, you develop him, you wait for him. If it doesn't work out, well, bummer. But if it does, the Boston Celtics remain scary for a very, very long time. I really hope you guys did enjoy this video. Again, make sure to go give us that follow on Twitter. Go join the Discord as well. If you want to talk basketball with a lot of people who love it just as much as you do, our Discord community here at Utility Sports is the best place for you. So go join that. Links in the description for both Twitter and Discord. Go follow us. Join that Discord. Also, leave a like and subscribe on today's video. It lets me know I'm doing a good job here at Utility Sports. And we'll catch you guys in the very next Utility Sports video.